Okay, we are here again for Perspective on Athletics, and today we have Natalie Winkelfoos. She is the Director of Athletics and Physical Education at Oberlin College in Ohio. Natalie, really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us today.
Well, thank you, Mark. There is absolutely no place I'd rather be than sitting on my couch in my office talking with you.
I get that a lot, so I'm happy to hear that. But, we've known each other for a few years, but for people that don't know you that well, why don't you start by giving us a brief sketch of your career track and how you ended up at Oberlin?
Sure. I ended up at Oberlin by chance. In college, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew that I loved athletics, and being an athlete was always a part of my identity. That's how I was described. It was Natalie the athlete, or I was part of that Winkelfoos family that was very athletic. But after graduation, I wanted to break away from that. So I went to grad school, got my master's in higher ed administration, was going to take the student personnel route. But then I realized, I wasn't being true to myself. And I'm an athlete. Don't try to run away from that. So I called my college coach and I said, I want to work in college athletics. This is what I want to do. What do you want to do? I want to be an athletic director. And she said, do you want to be a good athletic director? And I said, isn't that the only kind to be? And, she said, if you want to do that, you have to coach. So she and I then started the search to find, anywhere that I could coach. I just asked her, can I come back and sit on your bench? She said, absolutely not. Not because I was a troublemaker. I mean, I was, but I needed a different experience. And Oberlin could not have been more of a different experience than what my background was. So I became the assistant coach at Oberlin, women's basketball coach. And it was 2 years that I spent on the bench and on the sidelines, the best 2 years, the greatest education that I could have gotten to have my seat now. And then after that, there was an opening on the administrative staff as just a, beginning level administrator, odds and ends, doing whatever anybody told me to do. And that's what I did. I really kind of touched the rung of each step on the ladder here at Oberlin and was able to work my way up. And now I have the big office.
Well, it's interesting. It was a very conscious choice on your part and taking the advice of a former mentor that in order to be an effective athletic director, you need to have coaching experience. A lot of people become athletic directors after having coaching experience, but I don't know how many of them are doing it consciously. So that was very interesting advice that you received.
Well, I think that my college coach is a very smart woman. And she never led me astray. And my goal is to be great, and so I was taking the chance and listened, and I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah. Well, I know as you worked your way through the department there at Oberlin, you were in a development role for a period of time, and you've gone through a couple of different athletic directors now, and in between those, you served as interim athletic director, 2 different stints before you've been hired now. So what was that like? And did you view those as a trial run? Did you think that this was an opportunity to show what you could do? Or were you, what was that like doing it not once, but twice?
Sure. The first time I did it, I had no intentions of wanting the job. But I wanted the experience to sit in a seat and knowing that I could turn it back over. So it was really exposure that I wanted, and I got. And I've worked under some wonderful people, and it's really been that experience that really kind of made me feel the second time around that I can do it. I've done it. And basically the second time I was told that I was applying for the job.
Is it any different now that you are the permanent athletic director as opposed to those 2 interim stints? Does it feel different? Are you treated differently? Is there any difference between the experiences?
Yeah. I'm not treated any differently. I think that through I'm entering my 10th year at Oberlin. That's crazy to think about. I've always, tried to be really consistent in how I approach each day. So I think that with that kind of mindset, people have treated me the same. It's different in the sense that, the decisions that I make are permanent for me. I have to live with those. But no, it's really not, because I don't think that even when I was an interim, I didn't play it safe. I made some big decisions as an interim because the goal is always to make this place better. I wasn't, and I remember telling our president that I'm not somebody that's just going to keep the seat warm, for the next person. Is that okay with you? And, nervously, yes, that's okay. So it's been awesome.
Yeah.
The transition has been relatively easy because I did have those 2 stints.
Right. No, well, that's terrific. And you talked about the goal is to make the place better. And I think certainly that's happening at Oberlin. But as most people might think about Oberlin, if they know where it is to begin with, is that Oberlin is a great academic institution and a conservatory of music, and it's known for its academics and its music. But athletics, not so much. I mean, it really hasn't been a powerhouse, so to speak, in athletics. And that certainly has begun to change. And I think that's been part of your mission there. But talk a little bit about that, really taking a place like Oberlin and taking on the challenge of building athletics into something much more competitive than it had been.
It's definitely not easy. It makes every day interesting, it makes every day challenging, and it makes every day really fun. It's changing a culture. It's changing the mindset of a lot of people. The student athletes, your coaching staff, your administrative staff, and the community. Because, as you said, this isn't a place where you think athletics yet. We've been very conscious of, becoming a bigger part of the community. Whether it's showing up at, the Oberlin city events or, having a presence in the school systems, just making sure that our facilities are also open to people and we're being very inclusive. It's been challenging in the sense that, everybody always says you have to make sure you have the right people on the bus, right? We've had a lot of turnover because, you have to change that mindset of, from the goal of participating to the goal being winning, and being competitive. So that's been challenging. Personnel is always, the most interesting part of the job, right? The most delicate part of the job. But it's been very good. As I said, we've had a lot of turnover, and I'm really happy, and I'm very lucky, and I'm very privileged to have the staff that I do and have the community support that I do as well.
You mentioned changing culture, which is never easy, but it sounds like you had to deal with an internal culture to the department as well as the campus culture as a whole. What do you think is most important to effectively changing culture?
Well, I think for Oberlin, it's been twofold. Internally, we've had to become really comfortable saying we want to win. And being very bold in saying that. And you think that in an athletics department that's not a hard statement to make. But for us, it can be because we're on a campus that doesn't always think of us first. But I can tell you externally, the mindset and the shift has had to be that we're not just thinking about athletics, if that makes any sense. We've done a much better job of telling our story and telling the story of our student athletes that, we have a football player on, who's tackling, opponents, but he's also tackling breast cancer research, in the lab. We have a fantastic women's soccer goalie who travels to Tanzania to help educate children. So it's letting them know that their stereotypes of athletes are incorrect. Or not completely incorrect, but a little misguided.
Yeah.
So we've had to do a better job of sharing who we are, and not just expecting and wanting people to come to us, but us taking the step to meet them where they are.
Right. What about, I would imagine, as you look at trying to build your programs, become more competitive and have more success athletically, you needed to bring in a different caliber of student athlete, I would imagine. And that speaks to recruiting and recruiting effectiveness and recruiting challenges. How has that transition been, and how have the coaches received this transition? And maybe that's part of the culture shift that has had to take place, but how have the coaches and the whole recruiting process transitioned along with your plan?
Our coaches are great. They really understand what type of kid they're looking for. They've gotten really savvy in understanding what a fit at Oberlin is. And, we've also spent a lot of time with our friends at admissions and telling them, what we're out there on the road looking for, and making sure that we're finding what they're looking for, not just fitting our roster. So it's been a really great partnership that we've developed with admissions. Couldn't ask for better teammates. And, for Oberlin, it also comes down to dollars in recruiting, because we can, but we don't always recruit in Ohio. We're stretching from coast to coast. Mm-hmm. So it gets expensive to do that. And, I haven't planted any money trees in our backyard. So, we have to be really smart in what tournaments we're going to, what showcases, what states we're going to. So there has to be that communication between, admissions and athletics, and finding out, are we going to the right places, and making sure that we're really collaborating and spending our money wisely, and finding kids who are going to be a fit and desirable. So it's been really good. I really can't complain.
Well, nobody usually listens. Yeah, right. So you mentioned planting a money tree, which nobody really has that, but you have done a considerable amount of fundraising there, and you started in the athletic development operation at Oberlin, and you have a very active Heisman club, which is raising annual funds, but the college and athletics is in the midst of a capital campaign, and you've done some wonderful things, and you're building a football stadium complex that is a signature facility, I think, for where athletics is headed. But talk a little bit about that whole development operation and how that has gone heading into this ultimate campaign for athletics and building new facilities.
Sure. I think that I'll have to credit Joe Carlgard, who was an athletic director prior to me. One of my mentors. He's now the athletics director at Rice University. But he was the man that was smart enough to think ahead, and he was the one that placed me in the role to kind of manage the Heisman Club. And with that, it was understood that I would become part of the development team. And I attended their staff meetings on a regular basis. I was involved in all of their discussions, even if it didn't pertain to athletics. I was sitting around the table and would sometimes make them think about athletics, because again, we're not always thought of. Used to be. Now we're thought of. Yeah. But so it started back then, and it was, it was established that there was a level of trust and understanding between athletics and in the development office. So, I was allowed, a certain amount of freedom, and was allowed to have a voice at the table, and was allowed to say, these are our needs, these are our wants, here are our priorities. So as we moved into this campaign, it was seamless. Everyone understood why we needed a new stadium. A stadium, gosh, it's been close to 100 years. It was time for us to build something new. But everybody understood. It was a stadium that was just used 5 times a year. It was a grass field. It had some old world charm to it, but I was happy to see it come down. And now it's going to be a multi-purpose complex, so it won't just be used just for football, but it's also a community space. we've been very mindful again of making sure that this is a space where a lot of people can collide and a lot of people can learn from each other. There's a social space that's within the space. It's incredible. It's more than what I imagined. We're all getting very excited to the opening day. But back to the fundraising piece of it, we're meeting needs. We're not meeting wants. So
it's going to be a wonderful addition, no doubt. And like I say, it's a signature facility for the direction of the department, and it also takes considerable dollars. As you entered into your role in development, and now with the campaign and raising the dollars you needed for these projects, how was it received from your alumni base or from prospective donors? Because again, athletics and athletics facilities and strength of the programs hasn't necessarily been a part of the institutional history. How was it when you started to hit the fundraising trail seeking dollars for this type of project?
Hitting the trail, it's my favorite part of the job. I spend a lot of time on airplanes these days. It's great. I have a lot of United miles worked up, but it's been wonderful because, as you said, this is a signature piece. This is a statement that the college is making to say that athletics is a valuable part of the curriculum. We're getting to a point where it's no longer being seen as a extracurricular activity. It's part of the curriculum. A lot of learning happens on playing fields and outside of the classroom. And, for our alumni who played a varsity sport or a club sport or was a phys ed major here, there's been times when people cry. I travel with my iPad and I will show them videos of the bulldozers moving and let them kind of see firsthand that this is happening. And they're always, their response is, "This is happening at Oberlin?" Like, yes, it is, And so it's been a really great greeting to sit down and kind of tell the story of, where we were. And that's their piece of the story, so that's their time to share with me. And I learn a lot from those conversations. And then, it's fun for them to turn it over to me and I get to share with them, where we're going. And that has been really wonderful. Now, you still have the naysayers, of course, that are wondering, why are we spending this money to build a stadium? And that's fun for me too, because then there gets to be, the conversation about the education and just the wonderful things that can happen through participation. And, this is also a space that we're allowing, that sounds really kind of, it's not what I mean, but club sports intramurals will have an opportunity to play in the stadium. The community, we're opening up to the local high school. So it's really a space, again, where I can say where, learning and leadership is going to collide. It's going to be an arena for showcasing our brilliance. Our facilities do not match the excellence of Oberlin College. And now it's the time that we're saying out loud, through bricks and mortar, that everything about Oberlin, all corners, are going to be amazing and top notch.
Yeah. That's terrific. And a capital campaign is an opportunity to do that, make those emotional connections with your alums and former student athletes. But what about the role of the Heisman Club, which I think, for lack of any other term, is an annual giving program? Where does that play in, particularly during a campaign like this? But where did it come from, and what's the role of the Heisman once you get this facility built?
So the Heisman Club serves as our booster club. They support us annually, typically. It's an 11-member board, and they have been incredibly helpful in helping, me and our staff and in development really make connections in finding people. Because Oberlin hasn't done an athletics project like this, we haven't turned over all the rocks, so to speak. And I'm using them as our connectors. They've also been wonderful contributors. I mean, our Heisman Club, they have been the staple of support since the 70s. and they've just they've been phenomenal in helping us kind of, pound the pavement. They're making calls for us, so it doesn't have to be just the ask coming from me. I think that it's really important in fundraising that you're being really smart about setting the table, and it's not always the AD that's going to make that connection and seal the deal. And I have no ego in this process. I just want to see it finish. So I want the right people to be sitting there. And so we have had some Heisman Club folks really kind of reach out and be fundraisers for us.
Yeah. What are your general thoughts about fundraising at the Division III level? Certainly you're very active on your campus and you've developed this program. You do have a capital campaign. Division III schools, similar institutions, they can be all over the map in terms of what's expected or allowed in some cases in terms of fundraising. What are your general thoughts or observations about fundraising at this level?
Yeah, I've been answering this question a lot, it feels like, recently, because a lot of people are scratching their heads and wondering what's going on at Oberlin. And, if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere, which I don't know if I should be offended by that or not. But it's totally a valid question, and I understand why they would say that. But I think at any level now, you have to be concerned about money. You have to be doing some sort of fundraising. Athletics is so inflation sensitive that it's getting harder and harder just to support your programs operationally. And if you want to be competitive, you have to find the way. I don't know about anybody else, but it's not that if I knock on our CFO's door and say, I need more money, he doesn't say, okay. So I guess, I think that you have to take kind of your destiny in your own hands, and you have to make it happen. I tend to like to try to make it happen for myself before I ask for help. So I think you have to fundraise. No matter what size your school is, no matter what your needs are, I think that it's a must these days.
Yeah. It's the reality, and I think, like you say, just to keep up with inflation or with the Joneses, as it may be, it's the reality of all Division III institutions, small colleges everywhere. So,
well, and for us, we're recruiting, high school students who are coming from, private schools or really great public schools that have way better facilities than we do. So we're a real letdown sometimes when they come, but we have everything else great to offer. The academics are top notch. So yeah, keeping up with the Joneses, but then just recruiting has gotten to be such a beast. So, your question about why and how, you just have to.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Well, it's exciting to see what's happening at Oberlin, and you certainly have enough to keep you busy for a while, and all things are pointed in the right direction, I think. But as we transition here, I wanted to ask you about leadership. You certainly are in the leadership position you're in now, and you had a couple stints as interim. But as you look at leadership, what do you think is important, whether it's specifically for athletics or athletic directors, but what makes a good leader? What do you think is important for good leaders to do and be? So as you think about this, what thoughts come to mind about leadership?
For me, leadership goes hand in hand with being a good listener, and just being able to take things in. The majority of my day is sitting and listening. But then I think what a good leader will do is take what he or she has heard and respond. Whether it's what the other party wants to hear or not, there's a response. There's follow up. There's follow through. I think that's really important. As I said earlier, that I wasn't going to be the person that keeps the seat warm. I think leaders take risks. And, I think that we're certainly taking risks at Oberlin, and fortunately it's paying off. But then you just have to be comfortable, with the times when it doesn't work. And, you have to be resilient. I mean, there's a lot that goes into being a good leader, and I think that I'm very early in my career, but I'm watching and I'm learning and I'm listening, and I'm excited to even continue my growth.
Yeah. What about that's on a more personal and local level, but what about on the more global level as you look at college athletics today? Obviously, the headlines are dominated by Division I and what's happening there. Ultimately, there is some impact on every level of collegiate competition whenever decisions are made up there. But as you look at the landscape of intercollegiate athletics today and small colleges, maybe in particular, what do you see out there that's happening or coming or that people should be concerned about or thinking about on the global front, more nationally, I mean?
I think it's when I'm looking around and I'm paying attention to what's happening everywhere, it's a bit scary.
Yeah, well, how so?
I think that we're at a turning point, and my fear is that there's the occasion that what that the student athlete experience, the student athlete is being lost in some of the decisions that are being made, and to me that's unacceptable. Any decision that we make here, the student athlete is forefront. I don't know, Mark. It's a good question. It's one that I think and scratch my head about often. But I'm sitting back and I'm watching and I'm listening and trying to really kind of predict the future, which is frightening.
If you could do that, you could have a whole different career and be much better
right.
off. Well, I think it will be interesting to see how it plays out. Like I say, there are challenges at every level and there are problems at every level. And the one commonality I always see and talk about is what you said, the student athlete. That is why these programs exist. And you're right, they often get lost in the shuffle sometimes, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So I want to transition. One last segment that I always include for all of our guests is advice for up-and-comers, people trying to break into the business or advance their career. There are literally hundreds of graduate programs in sport management, athletic administration, what have you. And the reality is there are far more graduates every year than there are actual jobs. And people are always looking for some competitive advantage, some advice, something to help get them that first job or help advance them, through their athletic career. And I'm sure you have these types of conversations either with peers or with students. And I'm curious what your thoughts are or your advice to those people is about getting into the business.
I think there has to be a sense of humility involved with breaking into the business. If there's a chip on your shoulder, you better knock it off. And there has to be a willingness to do a little bit of everything. I see that some of the younger folks, they want to skip steps, and that it's not the way to do it. Some people are able to do it, but generally it's not how it happens. I think that the best job you always have is the best job. How's it go? The best job is the one you already have. And I tell people to own your job, no matter what it is. Do it right, do it well, do it honestly, and and not be afraid to ask for help. Especially at the Division III level, you can accept a position and think that it's this, and then the next day it could say, what, you're going to be in charge of X, Y, and Z. I didn't sign up for that, but I'll do it. I again draw on my own experiences, and I remember when Joe Carlgard said, you're going to be in charge of the Heisman Club, annual fundraising. I'm like, I don't know anything about that. And he said, you'll learn. And, rather than me not accepting that challenge, I said, okay, I'll learn. So I think that has to happen. There just has to be a willingness to try and a willingness to fall down, but you have to get back up.
Great. And what about on the hiring front, when you are looking to hire staff, whether it's coaches or administrative positions, are there things that you look for or things that you think set people apart in their candidacy compared to others?
Absolutely. You know, resumes are great. Obviously, they show you everything that you can do on paper, but I get the most. I get the most from sitting down with somebody face to face. I think that there's no better way to get to know someone. There's no replacement for face to face interaction, and you know that's where you can tell, like, is somebody sitting down and looking you in the eye. You know, is there kind of a positive energy around them? You know, and I just ask a lot of questions, and you know, they sometimes don't pertain to, you know, what's on your resume. For me, I just want to surround myself with good people that are willing to work hard.
Yeah. Well, I think that is the key, and I think it's very good advice for anybody looking to get into the business, and wish you the best of luck in hiring those folks as they come along. Natalie, we've come to the end of our time, so I do want to wrap up the show, and I want to take this opportunity again to thank you for taking time out of your day and joining us here.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate this.
Sure thing. Well, this has been Perspective on Athletics. We've just been talking to Natalie Winkelfoos of Oberlin College, Director of Athletics and Physical Education. Until next time, I'm Mark Majeski.